Let's take a look at point objects using both Land Desktop and Civil 3D. And let's maybe look at it from the context that the field crew has gone out, collected some data. They've provided us several ASCII files that contain the data that was collected, and I need a portion of it, but I don't need all of it. Now, to begin to process in Land Desktop, there are a number of things that we need to overcome to be able to be successful with that. The first is I have to be tied to a project to have access to a point database with which to work. So we'll go ahead, create a new drawing. We'll call this point information, and we'll add it to a new project, P for points. Now, if I added this to an existing project, I would have to commit all of the points to that database, as well as run the risk of maybe some of this point data interfering with data that was already there. We'll go ahead and accept a Imperial 50 scale, new project, new point database, and I'm in. Well, to start bringing in some of those points, we'll go to the point pull down. We will import the points from an ASCII file. And if we come out to the folder where they exist, we see that they've given us a number of files. Now, in this case, there's only 6, but maybe they've collected points for days, or maybe there's a whole folder of files. In Land Desktop, I am required to bring these in one at a time. So we'll take and process the first one. We can zoom extents. That's one portion of it. Now, the area that I'm looking for is of a detention area. Let's import our points again. Grab the next one. Process that one. That comes in as well. And we see those added to the system. That's not the area that I'm looking for. So you see, as I go through, you know, it's going to be a little bit cumbersome, especially if I have a lot of files. I have to do them one at a time. The next thing is visualization with the points is kind of clumsy. In this case, I don't have a lot that are overlapping, but I'm sure if you work with land, you have a situation where they do. And as those points overlap, if we want to start connecting the dots to make them bigger or smaller, we have to go in and start adjusting the properties of the points on a point-by-point basis. Maybe work with relative to screen. It's just not the cleanest way to go through and do that. At the same time, if I'm going to go through and start connecting the dots maybe around the detention area, in this particular situation, we'll just looking at connecting the dots, I have to go into a special line command. And if I'm going to start connecting the dots on points, I have to tell it .p for point number, and let's do 32025, and I'd like to go to 3230. And I messed that up. So point number is not going to let me do it that way, so 32025. Next point, 3230. All right, so once again, it'll allow me to do it. It's not the most intuitive. In this case, it didn't do point to point to point. For that, I would actually have had to come in and do a line by point number and range. All right, so even though I'm familiar with it, I still messed it up because it requires multiple commands for me to be able to do this effectively. At the same time, I'm limited by lines. If I wanted to create polylines, or what if I wanted to use this for inserting blocks, or worst case scenario, if you've ever turned on the .p or the .n or the .g operation, that's remembered forever. So if we start executing other commands like bringing in symbology, it's going to keep remembering those point numbers. So if we come into line by direction, now it's going to start asking for point numbers, and that's not going to go away until we hit .p to turn it back off, or we get out of Land Desktop and come back in. So in addition, as we deal with points, the points themselves they require special Land Desktop commands. So if I wanted to, bring these in, and I'm only interested in a particular area, let's zoom extents here. If I'm only interested in a particular area and I brought in too much, simply by erasing these points off the screen doesn't remove the points. I have to use special commands here where I can say edit erase, such that will erase those We'll say selection, and we'll window these. All right, because now they're erased from the screen. They're also erased from the database. We always have to worry about these things getting in and out of sync. All right, cumbersome, especially if we're just bringing in data to do some quick work or some quick visualization before we can move on. All right, so certainly a very powerful tool, a very useful tool, but a number of things that we need to overcome for us to be successful and productive with it. Let's take and flip over and look at the same operation using Civil 3D. Now I'm in Civil 3D and I'd like to leverage points, once again, that information from the field crew. So I'm going to, because my interface is task driven, I'd like to insert some data, points from file. And if we navigate out to the same folder, Civil 3D will allow us to grab all of the files at once. So we can process each one at the same time as opposed to each one individually. So we'll say open, we'll click OK. I'll allow those points to be processed, and if I do a zoom extents, I can immediately see all of the points for those files. Now, I said before I was looking for a detention area. This is the area that I'm interested in. So without having to use any additional special commands or anything like that, I can, just leveraging my menu here, we can say erase and quickly remove these points. About almost 9,000 of them, they're erased, they're gone. That's it. I never had to commit them to a database. If only I was interested in just the stuff that the data that's right here. Now, my information for my points is currently only showing the location of where it was shot. I could easily come into the group itself, modify the properties of that group, maybe to show, well, let's see the elevations for those points. Those elevations will display on the screen. When we see that, they're kind of overwriting each other. Well, it's a dynamic environment. I can quickly flip to a 20 scale display and they will all automatically update for us. All right, much easier to deal with in LAN desktop in that the display is dynamic. I can bring the points in, no special commands are required. If I want to connect the dots, I've got a number of transparent commands, very similar to what I had in the LAN desktop world with .p, .g, and .n. However, with these, the commands will work with any command, so I don't need any special line command or anything, any special. In fact, let's do it with a polyline. So we'll say polyline, specify start point. I'm going to go ahead and we'll go from a point number. So enter point number. I'd like to, let's see, we'll hover over this one to see what it is. This is point number 35975. So let's polyline, point number 35975, and I'd like to go to 35. Let's say 985. And it automatically connects the dots, goes through all of those points for us, even works its way around the detention area. All right, just happen to be the points that we selected. And it's a polyline. So the command, it can be used for anything, lines, polylines, wherever it's going to ask us for select a point. Now, if I don't know the point numbers because they're not displayed on the screen, well, I could very easily come in and create a line that is going to allow me to go by point object. So I want to go from here to this guy, to this guy, to that guy, and then back down to here. All right, very intuitive, very, very easy to use, very quick and user-friendly. I can now consume massive amounts of data very easily, quickly filter out what I'm looking for. And now that I have the data that I need on the screen, I can now migrate that back into LAN desktop, which gets back into how I can quickly leverage this as a tool to supplement LAN. I can quickly bring data into here. I can get information about that data with respect to what point numbers have been used for the collection, eliminate areas that I'm not concerned with. If we need to come in and do some editing with respect to those, we can modify our points. And we can come through and renumber, adjust their elevation, set their elevation from the surface. Number of tasks that can be done with the points. Once again, if you're a LAN desktop user, certainly not anything that's outside the realm of what you would be comfortable with. Once I'm done with all of this and I've made my adjustments and I'm happy with the points, I'd like to now commit those back to a LAN desktop project. What we can do is export those to LAN XML and move them back to LAN. So we're going to come down for the point group. All points, we'll say export to land XML. For me to go to Civil 3D or from Civil 3D 10 to Land Desktop 2009, I'm going to set it to Land XML 1.1. We'll say OK. I'll throw that on my desktop for right now. We'll just call it points. We'll save that. And let's hop back to land. In this particular project, let's go ahead. The information we're interested in, it's under projects. We're going to say import land XML. Try that one more time. We'll say import from land XML. There we go. Off my desktop, I'm going to come down to Points.xml. We'll go ahead and open that. We're bringing in about 2009 points, but more importantly, the specific points and set the way that we'd like them to be. We'll say OK. It's going to import that information. Those are fine. And we'll go ahead and import them. So as that works its way across, it's inserting the 2009 points. They've been converted from what we did in Civil 3D. Once again, Civil 3D is going to be an effective tool, especially on the front end of a project, that we can once again consume an awful large amount of data, pare it down to what we need, and then commit that to our point database without having to create dummy projects and things like that I used to do in Land Desktop to effectively do the same thing. If I've connected the dots in Civil 3D for line work, I could just export that line work to a drawing file, bring that up directly in Land, and I would be ready to go. So my import has been completed, and you'll see my points have been migrated successfully back into Land Desktop. So with that being said, leveraging Civil 3D as a tool to supplement land, what that does for us is, first, it allows us to work with points without the points being dependent on a database. Second, the visualization of those points is pretty much effortless. We can adjust their size very quickly just by setting the scale at the bottom of the screen. We can also adjust their display with respect to labels by applying one of the default styles. We can load multiple ASCII files at one time. So if as projects become more complex and I have maybe a whole folder full of ASCII files, I can process them all at once to bring them in. I can leverage standard AutoCAD commands. And one of probably the most important ones is undo will work, because I don't have to worry about rolling changes out of an external file. My transparent commands are more flexible in that they can be used not only for standard lines, no special line commands, but I can also use polylines or any other command that requires a point. More importantly, I don't need to worry about turning it back off when I'm done, so a lot of that frustration goes away. And then ultimately, when I'm done, I can migrate the points very quickly back to Land Desktop via Land XML, such that I can continue on in an environment that I'm familiar with. So with that being said, that concludes the points portion of the presentation.